What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Six Figure Studio Group. My name is Ben, and I'm here with a special guest here with Nate, and he's going to talk about his voice studio and what he's been able to accomplish. Say what's up, Nate.
Hey, how's it going, y'all?
Awesome.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
glad to be here.
really excited. Um, Make sure if what we're going to talk about is Nate's journey and how Nate has been able to grow like his voice studio. But his story is really interesting because he's also a student as well. But we're going to go ahead and just dive right into it. So if you're pumped in the comment section, go ahead and type pumped in the chat. And without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Nate Paul, and I've been teaching for quite a while, a number of years, and as a voice teacher, and amongst some other things. But voice has always been the primary focus, and yeah, right now, I mean, it's been an interesting experience post pandemic because I've decided to go back to grad school and finish out my schooling. I'm finishing up my master's currently, and will start my doctorate in the fall. So trying to find the balance last year before we had started working together was really interesting just because I was trying to figure out how to maintain, teaching as, my primary source of income and while also trying to focus on myself as a student and trying to improve my own singing, but as well as, being able to devote the time that I was, the amount of time that the amount of money I was investing in this degree was necessitating from me.
For sure. Yeah. And like I definitely felt like I definitely feel you because like when I was growing my studio, I was also like a full-time student as well. And it's pretty crazy because like you not only have your classes, you have your rehearsals and you have your teaching, but then you also gotta have a social life too, like your
Yeah.
own time. So like I guess before starting to work with me, like tell us a little bit more about the voice studio in general, like who you help, what exactly you do, and also like I think a lot of people would be really interested in how your studio is a little different and kind of like your philosophy with teaching is a little
Yeah.
different than other voice teachers.
Cool. Yeah. So, before I started working with you, um, I had, I was based in Middle Tennessee, and, being right in the heart of Nashville, I mean, you're never really strapped for finding students. But it was always a challenge of finding students that were gonna stick around, and if you weren't telling them absolutely everything they wanted to hear, well, they'll just go find somebody else. Because a lot of what they were experiencing was not really wanting discernment but wanting to just be told they were right. But at the same time, whenever you're in a position of you know not always being able to uh pick and choose who you want to work with, you're just kind of put in a corner and saying, okay, I got to work with this person, because I also got to put food on the table.
Hmm.
So that was what I was experiencing whenever I was in Tennessee. And then when I moved to Indiana to go to the Jacobs School of Music, that was whenever I started seeing that, you know, I transferred to a solely virtual model, and all of a sudden only the students that really wanted to stick around, stayed, and those were the ones that really wanted to put in the work. So I started to kind of get um, this kind of bug for wanting to find more students like that, and not always having to take what I could get. And then yeah, and then we met and started talking, and one of the things that had drew me to what you were talking about was you know being able to have that kind of student acquisition funnel, being able to be in that position of I get to choose who I work with.
Hmm.
And that's such a great place to be in, because then it's not only is it time that you're spending investing into students to have a monetary return on it, but also like it's so rewarding to work with people who actually care about what you have to say and actually are going to take what you have to say and apply it. So that has been a really really great part of the students that we've gotten since since you and I started working together, and also by transitioning the old system in which I was sitting here and at the end of the month getting everybody's schedules and trying to arrange something. Um, all of my time was being spent really on just making sure their lessons happened rather than being able to actually be in the moment and get consistent curriculum and more um, you know uh, getting more in depth on the things that I knew I needed to have enough time for, but never really got around to, such as, being able to go into, like, for my studio specifically, as a vocalist and as somebody who is really values the importance of voice habilitation within the singing space. um, a lot of the tools I use are highly effective with students, but they're only so effective if they know how to use the tools. So, we would never get the time to really go into how they're using the tools outside of the lessons. And so they would come in, everything would be great, and then they would leave and then come back, and it was just like rebuilding the wheel again.
Yeah, it's
And I'm
it's like
like,
a constant cycle.
yeah,
I
and I'm like, why is this happening? But then once we got to the point of moving to a hybrid system for the studio, it was okay. We have our private lessons where we solely focus on you as the individual, getting down to brass tacks, and then having performance workshops and also technique workshops where we actually get to go in and talk about how these tools work in detail, and I get to see how they practice on their own, which I think is huge in regards to making sure that there's overlap from the studio to a performance to the practice room and everything in between. It becomes more interdisciplinary at that point, and that was something whenever we moved to these group workshops that we had time to do. And now, I mean, we have students that are really starting to get a fire underneath them and are super ambitious to spread the good word of what we've got going on here, because it is something that's really unique. And I gotta give a shout out to my mentor, Dr. Brian Gill, because
Nice.
a lot of what I've gotten is from working with him, and I will always sing his praises because he's probably one of the he is the cream of the crop when it comes to understanding how the voice works within a teaching slash like singing practitioner space. But the other side of that being that, now that they're seeing more immediate transformation with consistency and, the ability to be empowered on their own by knowing that in their own practice time that they're not going to mess something up, that they're actually going to get it right. That they're coming into the lessons with more questions, and they're coming into the lessons with, actual goals, rather than we come in every week and it's warm up, sing some reps, see you later, see you in 2 weeks. It's okay, this is what I've been working on this week, and this is what I want to work on today. And it's like, great, let's do it.
Yeah,
So that's been really
100%.
nice.
I love that. I appreciate you for sharing us all that as well. Because there's a lot to unpack right there too. Like just starting off with the relatability with whoever's watching here, right? If you're watching and it sounded like for you, Nate, the biggest problems, and correct me if I'm wrong, was like the needing to get more students consistently, but also like the right types of students. Is that right?
Bingo. Yep.
Yeah. So because like it's one thing to be able to get more students, right? But what about us? We need to be able to feel fulfilled teaching the right students as well. So it's not even about helping students get that opportunity in music education, but it's matching them up with the right teacher as well, which is super, super important.
Yeah, and I should point that out too, is that with this transition, this has put me in a position where we have enough people coming in where we've been able to bring in more teachers.
Mm,
Before you and I started working together, I remember telling you at the beginning that I was thinking about bringing on some teachers, and I had gotten a couple students, but then once things started going, it was like, yeah, this is actually having a team has been super nice, and being able to have some, whenever I am, in class, to have somebody there that is still available, that can still, answer questions, and vice versa for them too, to have that kind of reciprocal relationship. That's been really also a really good benefit of taking this step forward in remodeling the studio.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I think a lot of people here are like either like teaching by themselves or they have a team, like they're a multi-teacher studio, maybe like a music school as well. And
Yeah.
thinking about like how's the model work for any of them, like it can work. And I think you would do a great job in being able to show that too. But with a lot of people here, like what we're really talking about is Nate's transition from like that typical one-on-one lesson model to the hybrid model that we teach here. So just
Yeah.
to like kind of help illustrate it for the people who are trying to still grasp like onto that onto that structure, like kind of can you share with us like what it looked like before, like the type of model you were teaching before, and then like what are you doing now in the studio that's allowing you not to have to trade your time in for money anymore?
Yeah. So the model I had before, even virtually, was very traditional. It was we come in, we warm up for 30 minutes, and then do about 30 minutes of repertoire. And then with most of my students, I would see them every other week, um, and for about an hour. Most of my students were 60 minutes, signed up for 60-minute lessons.
Mhm.
Um, which again, there's a lot of dead time in between each lesson, so the a lot of the responsibility is put on them to make sure that in those 2 weeks that I don't see them, that they're putting in work. And now what we have with the hybrid workshops is, you know, it is, us being able to take on, a more or less the hybrid model and the way that we've used it in our studio has been something along the lines of generally keeping the 2 private lessons a month like they've been doing, so they're getting that individual time, but then adding only one extra thing to each of their schedules, which is every other in those weeks between doing performance workshops where we bring in that rep, right? And we get to actually work on what they're doing. And so in some ways, I found that those are the more productive times because now we get to see what happens in a pressured situation,
Yeah.
which has been, I mean, really been helpful in them seeing how well they bring their A game to an audience versus whenever we're super comfortable, it's just you and me, which is a very different environment. And the stakes are pretty low, so you're willing to trust your teacher to do anything you want. So, anything they want. So when it comes to the trading of time for money, I think in some ways, us being able to have these workshops is allowing us to have less of a I'm giving you money so you come in for 60 minutes and work with me, and more of a relationship of um more of like a high support coach, that I'm going in and I am constantly there. Just, in those weeks in between, I'm not, trying to figure out how to some extent, the time in between is me just being there in a coach sense versus a teacher sense. So that's what more of
Yeah.
that
How
makes
do
more
you how do
sense.
you separate like how do you differentiate that? Because I know we've had discussions about this, but for the people that are like, what does he mean? The difference between a teacher and a coach? Like how do you see that difference?
Yeah. So I think the big thing within the world of voice and why these terms have become pretty nebulous and kind of intermingled and
Yeah. It's like we got a
is
bunch of different hats.
yeah, and how there's been, it's kind of loose in how people define themselves, even though there are pretty clear, I think pretty clear boundaries. Is that as a voice teacher, you know, majority of your time is spent on, should be spent on habilitating the voice function, voice coordination, getting things to happen with immediacy and effortless repetition, right? That should be the goal as a voice teacher. And then as a voice coach, you get to come in and you get to kind of take what has been done from the voice teacher and you get to apply your knowledge of the aesthetics of a very specific topic into that space. So, somebody may be a very knowledgeable person on Stephen Sondheim, and by you sending, that person to a Sondheim voice coach, they can provide advice on what you should, how to get it to be authentic to the style. And then you would take that back to the voice teacher and then they would work on that. So, as somebody who is wearing both of those hats now, what that looks like for me is in the lessons, we're really getting down to much more specific aspects of like how their voice as an instrument works, and then putting that into practice and seeing how things work. And then whenever we get into the workshop itself, that's where they can bring a song in, and that's where we start focusing on, is the intention of what you're wanting to communicate to an audience showing up through how well you're coordinating your voice. And if it's not, then that's a cause for pause to say, you know, is the intention of what I want my audience to feel overriding what has got me to make great sounds, which is the technique. So I always say this: technique is an art.
Hmm.
To be able to be a good technician is an art in and of itself. And some people don't even realize how good of a technician they are. I say that all the time about Whitney Houston. I mean, she was incredible and she didn't even realize how good she was. But you watch any of her performances, and it's just such a strategic approach to singing. It's really remarkable.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of like Hannah Montana. It's the best of both worlds right there. In
Yeah,
in terms of like teacher and coach hat, in terms of private, what the benefits of private lesson and the benefits of group lesson too. That's really what that's really what I wanted to bring with the hybrid model. It's like it's not about doing one or the other. It's about having all of the best parts to help facilitate the student's success. Because in the end,
yes,
the biggest like that's I obviously I don't teach in your studio, but I know the results that your students have been able to accomplish, and that is a huge part of their success. Is when like you, Nate, you're able to support them, not only be able to teach them, but be able to coach them and not have to burn out your time and energy being able to do that as well. So I
yeah,
think that's an awesome part of that. I think a lot of teachers here, they that idea can really grasp on, and a lot of people do really like that. But now when it comes to like taking action, that's where like the difficulty comes into play. um awesome. And one of the things that I wanted to really share with the audience here was you taking action and making that transition to your actual students, because I feel like the biggest fear with a lot of teachers who do this is like, what if students leave? Like, what if I start losing more money?
yeah.
But we also have to think about the upside too. What if everyone is super on board? So tell us about your experience with being able to transition into this new hybrid model with your own students.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it, and I think I resonated with that at first. I felt that too. And you and I talked about it, and I was like, I don't know, man. I mean, most of these people, I mean, they've been working with me for a long time, and but I think to my advantage is they had been working with me for a long time. They knew me, they trusted me, and at the same time they knew that I, because I've worked with them for so long, and and I've helped them see the transformation in their voices, but also I've been there for a lot of things, that I'm not the kind of person to lead them down a path that is, not in their best interest. So whenever I started moving things over to the hybrid model, uh, it was a matter of actually going and, I mean, on the front end, if I'm honest, it was a bit of work to get in contact with everybody on the phone call, because I really wanted to make sure that like we were talking over Zoom or over the phone about like what this was going to look like, and also be there to answer questions and really be transparent. Uh, because I mean, when for most of us that have been in a traditional model for so long, to go to something like this at first, without having, I say this all the time, text doesn't convey tone. So I'm very much the kind of person that's like, let's get on a call, so that way like it's coming from a good place. It's coming from a place that we is going to lead us down a good path, moving forward. And so yeah, we got on the phone with everybody, and everybody received it really well. Everybody was super accepting of this transition, and they were really excited because I think they all were equally perturbed by how long it would take me to get everybody's schedules for the following month. But I mean, whenever you're teaching, so many people by yourself, it's really hard to find time for that, find time for school, find time, like what you were saying, for a social life, and then have this thing that really didn't have to be such a time eater, um by moving over to something like, like what we had talked about, which was my music staff. And that was huge. I mean, that piece of advice from you and the other people in the community was so nice, because now they have the power to go in and they get to choose the times that they want. And but it also allows me the power to have a set schedule. These are the times I have available, you know
Hmm.
so I think for the part of the transition, that was huge. Is we have a set time for the workshops, I have a set schedule for each month, and you can pick from those.
Yeah.
And everybody, and I, while at the same time understanding what everybody's general schedule is, so that way I'm keeping blocks out that are mutually beneficial for everybody, me and, the people in the studio.
Saves a whole lot of time and energy right there, not only for like you, but for your students as well. And there's one thing we didn't talk about, but you can feel free to share as much or as little as you want about this, but even like the financial part of growing the studio as well. How is being able to make that transition, including like raising prices and things like that. How has that been able to help the studio financially now?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer that in a second. I just want to add this too with the
Yeah.
scheduling, that whenever you and I started working together, I mean, I probably spent each at the end of each month a good 8 to 10 hours of just putting a calendar together that
Dang.
made sense for everybody. And now I spend zero. Like,
There we go.
you know
There we
what I
go.
mean? That has probably been one of the biggest successes, is just because I have I mean, that's a whole 10 hours of time that I can spend doing, other things for the studio, finding new clients as well that are going to be a good fit for us. So, I just wanted to point that out.
100%.
Um but as it pertains to the actual financial aspect, I mean, being able to move to a system where, again, it's not a trade of time for money, it's a trade of expertise. We now have a system where, we have people pay in advance, for an allotted amount of time, typically 4 to 6 months. And that allows us to have the money up front so we can immediately invest that back into the studio, towards, making sure that, because I do go down and I get to give in person. We get to do in person recitals whenever I go back to Tennessee. So renting out spaces for our recitals, and not having to worry about, are we going to have enough money coming in this month for me being to cut a check to whoever. It's like, no, the money's there. You all have already invested in it, and I'm gonna be able. And now I have, more or less um the urge, the motivation, forced motivation in a
Hey,
way,
you
to
right
get
there.
it done, because now you're counting on me to make sure that these things happen. And it has happened and it's shown up in a big way. by us being able to do these recitals and us being able to do invite people in and have them talk to our students. We had somebody recently that is a specialist in women's health,
Ooh.
and she got to come in and talk to the ladies in our studio about like the connections between women's health and singing. And I think that it comes much more um intuitively from somebody who lives that experience and lives that truth than from me.
Hmm.
You know, I know those things because I am an active researcher in voice, but at the same time, I think that it's much more relatable when it comes from somebody who lives, again, who lives that same experience.
Yeah.
And that was a really valuable thing for especially, my younger students who didn't know.
Hmm.
But again, are not necessarily in a position where I'm, they're gonna receive it the same way from me. So yeah, so being able to have money up front to invite these, clinicians and stuff in to talk to us has been great, and it's valuable information for them. Um, I think the other thing too of having the money up front from a personal side too is I can focus not on getting every student or every possible lead. It's I can talk to the people that are leads and really pick who I want to continue forward with and
Yeah.
continue that process with, because we're not strapping for cash. We're in a place where we have enough money, and if there's somebody that's really not going to be the best, best fit for our studio, then, we can be upfront and say, I don't think, we're the best fit, but, you know, then we can devote our time to those people that really align with what we're trying to offer, what we're trying to promote in the realm of, singing and, music making. And that's been such a nice experience to work with students who really get it, who really get us, and we get them. And we have just we have a really grand time nowadays, because nowadays as a teacher, my mind isn't off, in another space while also teaching, because I'm still thinking about this student that, you know, has that I'm worried about, because they're not doing what, we've talked about, and they're not really putting the time in. So yeah, we get really motivated students that
Yeah.
come in, and it's really great.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. It's like all those like it sounds like it's like all those little things too. It's like you gotta stress about like scheduling. You gotta stress about, man, I just lost the lead, but were they the right types of student? Like all of those little things can take a toll on us. Um, if it starts to build up. And I think like for you, you have a lot more clarity, a lot more focus in the studio while you're still doing your grad stuff. I know you're scrambling around like submitting your your grad recordings and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm glad you're able to like do that and not have to worry about the studio like setting on fire or anything like that as well.
Right. Yeah, again, I don't ever think we're never in survival mode.
Mhm.
you know we're in a mode of like, you know we're thriving on a sustainable it with a sustainable system where, if we absolutely have to take, you know time off, that it will still run, and it will still be fine, and we can come back to it in 2 days after we've gone and done a gig, or we've gone and done an audition, or I've had a really really big project that I've had to put together, and I can come back to it and it's still there, and I still keep an open line of communication even during that time. But it's not something where, if I'm not absolutely dedicating every ounce of my life to this, will it stay afloat?
Yeah. It's a
So
tough
that's been
that's a
the
tough position to be in for sure.
yeah.
So, I mean, if you're ever feeling that way too, like just know, like kind of like what Nate has been through, there's a way. There's a way to be able to get around that. And as we're wrapping up this interview here, I'd love to like first off, really appreciate like everything you shared because it's all been gold. All been gold. And I know like even for me, like teaching you and showing you how to make that transition, like hearing it back and with the results that it's been able to give you, it's definitely very inspiring. And it helps me be able to keep pushing forward as well. So just wanted to give you a chance to give any last words, piece of advice for anyone that was in your position before.
Mm.
Um, yeah, anything to share there to help them out.
Yeah, I think that if there's any piece of advice I can give is, you know, if you think that things are going as well as they possibly could and you're in the routine of teaching on a regular basis the way you're doing it now, you know, really zone in and think about what aspects of your life that you're not really being able to give as much attention to, and then put yourself in the mindset of what if I could? What if I could have time for that? You know, because whenever you start thinking about those things, you'll realize that there's got to be a better way. You know, there's got to be a more efficient way. There's got to be a more timely way to do this. And there is. And, you know, to share a quick personal thing, you know, personal story, but, you know, years and years of sitting there and, you know, teaching literally 9, 10 hours a day straight for 5, 6 days a week before I came to grad school takes a toll on you physically, you know, and over now that I've been able to, you know, be more conscientious with how my time has worked, you know, it's not just a monetary success, it's not just a, you know, personal success or a professional success. It's been, you know, also a physical success of me being able to take more time to, you know, and it seems so simple, right? But being able to take time to cook for yourself, being able to take time to go to the gym, being able to take time to work out and just get enough sleep and all these things that musicians oftentimes are taught that if you're not struggling, you're not trying hard
You're
enough,
not,
and
yeah, or
you don't have to. You don't it you know, I say this as a teacher all the time. Singing is never should never be a physically detrimental effort. You know, it shouldn't be hard. Um and I think the same goes for teaching too. That as a teacher, you should never have to sacrifice your physical well-being and your emotional well-being to, you know, give back to what you love doing, which is being an educator. And eventually, if a lot of times all, you know, roads lead to the same destination if we're not being mindful of those things, which is burnout. So I think in a huge way that, you know, working with you, Ben, has been a really, really great blessing for me being in school because it has really motivated me to, you know, find a way to make the aspects of the studio that aren't actually teaching focused as minimal as possible so that way I actually have time to do the things that I need to be doing from, you know, a school aspect, from a social aspect, and from a physical and mental aspect as well. So that's been a huge win. So thank you.
I love it. I love it. Time and energy. Like
Yep.
I always talk about that a whole lot because it's one of the two things that we can't get back. Money we can always earn, right? We'll find a way to be able to get more money, but there's literally no way to be able to get back that time and energy. And like I said before, really appreciate you, Nate, on everything that you've done. Like I don't take credit for any of this because you have been you have been the one to be able to take action, especially with the in the face of like going through school. Like we're both really young still, so it's like we have that ambitious spark in us, but being able to make it happen and taking that imperfect action is super important. So I just want
Thank
to say I just want to say thank you for being here to share your story. It's been super, super valuable as well. If you're watching this right now, go ahead in the comment section. Thank Nate for sharing his time and his energy with us as well. I have a lot of fun being
Yeah.
able to coach you and just talk. Um, you know, we've had talks of not only like about your studio, but like just other things in life as well. So it's been a
Yeah.
pleasure getting to know you as a teacher and you as a person. So if you're watching this as well and you're someone like Nate who wants to be able to have more time and freedom with their studio as well, make sure to join our Six Figure Music Studio Facebook group. There should be a link around here, but if not, comment below and I will be able to help you out. We have a lot of resources in there, just like our Six Figure Studio roadmap as well. So if you haven't had access to that, let me know. I can make sure you get your hands on it completely free, but it will show you the exact blueprint and the exact roadmap that Nate has been able to go through as well, with being able to transition into his hybrid model and not only earning more money with the studio, but earning more time and energy as well. So, other than that, everyone, hope you have enjoyed. Everyone, give Nate a big shout out and big thank you below. And I will see you all real soon. Thank you.
Ciao.